Mr. Josiah Oldcastle had an old vintage car with a shiny horn. It had a black hood, was coloured blue, and it was called Gumdrop. Mr. Oldcastle also had a young dog with a wet nose, large floppy ears, and was called Horace. The main thing was that Mr. Oldcastle loved them both very much indeed. One fine day, Mr. Oldcastle came out of his house and hopped into Gumdrop. He explained to Horace that it was Gumdrop's birthday tomorrow, and that they were going into the village to buy him a cake. At that news, Horace barked and jumped into the car too. He liked cakes. As they drove off, Mr. Oldcastle's neighbour, Stan, ran out. "If you're going to the village, can I have a lift, please? I'm going to buy a belt," he said. "Can I come too?" called Mr. Mutts, who lived at the end of the road. "I need a pound of tasty nuts." Mrs. Wood had just left her house, realised that they were going to the village, and asked if she could come too. "I need a length of good strong thread." Before Mr. Oldcastle could get going again, he heard another voice from behind the car. "It's me," said Mr. Dyer. "If you can find room for me, I want to buy a pair of boots." So they all hopped in, and with a hoot, Gumdrop was on his way. The people stared in amazement at all the people in the car. Suddenly, there was a bang, and people jumped in fright. Mr. King's hat flew off. "Your tyre's burst," cried Mr. Dyer, and indeed it had. They all hopped out, and Mr. Mutts and Stan helped to change the wheel. Mr. Oldcastle had put the nuts that hold the wheel on the ground. They put the spare wheel on, but realised the nuts had vanished. Mrs. Wood looked. Mr. Dyer looked. Then Mr. Mutts cried out, "They've rolled down that nasty drain." Mr. Oldcastle looked glum. He had some more, but they were old and rusty. "I hope they'll hold the wheel all right," he muttered, as he screwed them up as tight as he could. So Gumdrop went on his way, but not for long. Suddenly there was a loud hiss. In a cloud of steam the engine stopped. "Your fan belt must have bust," cried Stan, jumping out of Gumdrop. Mrs. Wood looked quite upset. They all wondered what to do. "Oh dear, I haven't got another belt," said Mr. Oldcastle. "But I have some string," said Stan, so they tied it round the fan and went on their way. By now they were getting late, and the shops would be shutting soon, and so Mr. Oldcastle was having to drive quite fast. Suddenly there was a flop as a strong gust of wind tore open the hood. Mr. Dyer was so surprised he nearly fell out of Gumdrop. Mrs. Wood screamed, "There's a great big gaping hole!" So yet again they all got out of the car and folded the hood down. They had at last reached the shops. They thanked Mr. Oldcastle for the lift. Then Mrs. Wood went off to buy her thread, Mr. Dyer to buy his boots, Mr. Mutts to buy his nuts, and Stan was hurrying to buy himself a belt, just in time. Horace jumped out of Gumdrop and barked. He liked cakes. They drove home again and had no more trouble on the way. Next day was Gumdrop's birthday. There he stood with a bust tyre, some old and rusty nuts, string for a belt, and a hole in his hood. "But at least you've got a birthday cake," said Mr. Oldcastle, as he put it on a table by the side of the car. Horace barked. He liked cakes. And then the party guests arrived. "Did you get your shopping?" asked Mr. Oldcastle. "Yes, I bought a belt all right," said Stan, "but it's for Gumdrop's fan, and may this fan belt never burst." "And I bought some nuts all right," said Mr. Mutts, "but they're for Gumdrop's wheel, and may they never roll away." "And I bought the thread all right," said Mrs. Wood, "but it's for mending Gumdrop's hood, and may it never tear again." "And I brought a pair of boots all right," said Mr. Dyer, "but boots for Gumdrop are really tyres, and may they never puncture." Then the guests gathered round Gumdrop to wish him many happy returns and another 50 years of happy motoring. "For he's a jolly good fellow," they sang, and "Happy birthday, dear Gumdrop, happy birthday to you." Mr. Oldcastle was very happy, and he thanked them all for Gumdrop's sake. "And here is the birthday cake," he said. But it wasn't on the table, and it hadn't rolled away. They all looked round. "Where's the cake?" Mr. Oldcastle cried. Horace was very happy too. He sat on the ground and he looked rather fat. There wasn't a crumb to be seen because he liked cakes.